Donald Trump's national security advisor repeats his threats against the Islamic Republic on his visit to the UK. 3 years on from the closure of the camp in Calais, what's the status of refugees in the region? And ahead of the UK's commemoration of Quds Day, the London March is targeted by extremists. Hello and welcome to Press TV's European News Bulletin. I'm Robert Carter. Later on, we'll be discussing the major headlines and what's trending on social media, but first, our top story. Speaking in London, the National Security Advisor to the United States, John Bolton, has issued a renewed threat aimed at the Islamic Republic of Iran. Bolton, who is dubbed a war hawk by his critics, told the British broadcaster Sky News that he blamed Iran for recent sabotage of Saudi oil ships and that any attacks in the Persian Gulf by the Islamic Republic will draw a very strong response from the US.
I don't think anybody who knows the region has any doubt who staged those attacks or the attacks on the Saudi pipeline pumping stations, whether Iran or their surrogates. We've made it very clear that this kind of behavior is not something they should be engaged in, and we've made it particularly clear that if American citizens or facilities are threatened or attacked, that there will be a very strong response.
Well, shortly after Bolton's visit, the UK will be welcoming the US President Donald Trump, who has led the US dangerously close to another escalation with Iran. Well, joining us now to bring us more on this story is journalist Marcus Papadopoulos, the editor of Politics First magazine. Welcome, Marcus. Thanks for joining us. Now, firstly, I want to ask you about John Bolton, who has spoken on the tensions between Iran and the US, threatening a strong response if any further attacks are carried out. What do you make of these threats?
Well, of course, John Bolton did not corroborate his assertion that Iran was behind the attacks on the Saudi oil tankers. He put forward no evidence whatsoever to support his argument. Therefore, a court of law would simply throw out John Bolton's claim. Now, whilst I don't believe the Americans will opt for a military campaign against Iran, I do believe that the Americans are looking at all other possible means to bring down the Iranian government, principally through sanctions, additional sanctions, but also by deterring America's friends and allies in the region and globally from buying oil from Iran, from trading with Iran, and from investing in Iran. Now, because the Americans
it is interesting you say that, Marcus, because to be fair with John Bolton, he did backpedal and say that the US has no intention for regime change in Iran. What do you make of that? Are we seeing a change in rhetoric?
No, what I believe we are seeing is psychological warfare, because, of course, one day John Bolton says that the American government wants to see the overthrow of the Iranian government because America wants to see freedom in Iran. And then the next day he says that America does not wish to overthrow the Iranian government. I believe that Mr. Bolton and indeed Mr. Trump and indeed Mr. Pompeo are employing psychological warfare against the Iranian government, in that they are trying to confuse Tehran by hoping that by saying we do not want to overthrow the Iranian government, that Iran's military, its special services, will drop their guard. The reality is that the Americans over the last 40 years, ever since the Iranian Revolution, have done everything within their power, with the exception of a military campaign against Iran, to bring down the Iranian government. That is why today the Americans are trying to deter countries from purchasing oil from Iran, which, of course, if that did happen, that would have very, very grave consequences for the Iranian economy.
Now, Marcus, Bolton also made various references to the UK leaving the European Union and Trump's apparent support for Brexit. Is he trying to pitch some kind of future trade deal in exchange for support against Iran, or is there something else, would you say?
Well, what we know already is that the Americans have been piling on immense pressure on Britain to stop trading with Iran and to stop investing in Iran. And it was only recently that I was speaking with an Iranian official who told me that last year Iran and Britain signed an agreement whereby Britain would modernize many clinics up and down Iran to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds, which would have been a very, very good business for Britain. And at the same time, it would have been very good news for Iranian clinics. Now, the British have terminated that agreement because of the pressure they are receiving from America. So there's no doubt about it that the Americans are attempting to exploit Brexit for their own benefit. And also the Americans do want to move in to the UK market. Britain,
yes, I do have to jump in, unfortunately, because we are out of time. But thank you very much for being with us and providing us your deep analysis on the topic. But now let's take a look